Iran planted sea mines in the Strait of Hormuz. That fact has been in the public record since March. The United States military sank 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels. It began mine clearance operations on April 11th. President Trump said on April 11th that American forces had started clearing the strait. And then, inside a single sentence in a situation report, a detail appeared that reframes the entire crisis. According to one report, confirmed by American military intelligence sources, Iran lost track of the mines it planted, not some of them. Enough of them that Iran, when it announced the strait was open on April 17th, could not actually guarantee that it was safe. Enough of them that the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command issued an advisory this week telling every ship captain on Earth that the standard shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz, the routes used by a fifth of the world's oil supply for decades, should be considered extremely hazardous due to the presence of mines that have not been fully surveyed and mitigated. Cyber Cuba, extremely hazardous. Not cleared, not safe, not open. Hazardous. Because someone laid mines in the most important 21-mile stretch of water on the planet and cannot tell you exactly where all of them are. Stay with me. Because the mines that can't be found are not just a military story. They are the specific physical reason that Project Freedom, the American military operation announced Sunday night, backed by 15,000 personnel and 2 aircraft carriers and more than 100 aircraft, got 2 ships through the strait on its first day. 2 out of approximately 2,000 vessels currently stranded in the Persian Gulf. 2,000 ships. Their crews running out of food, running out of water, running out of fuel. 20,000 sailors from India and the Philippines and Bangladesh and Indonesia and Pakistan who are not in a war and did not start one and have been trapped on their vessels for 67 days because of a political dispute between governments they are not part of. The mines are why those sailors are still there. The mines are why Project Freedom is not, as of this morning, a freedom. The mines are why the Brent crude price is above $110 a barrel today. The mines are why the average American gas price hit $4.46 yesterday. And the mines are also why Iran, the country that placed them, cannot simply say the strait is open and mean it. We are going to explain all of that. Stay with me. First, the mine, because the word is abstract and the physics are not. A naval mine is a self-contained explosive device deployed in water, designed to detonate on contact with or proximity to a vessel. Iran's mine arsenal, developed over decades with expertise from Soviet-era designs, Chinese imports, and domestic production, includes contact mines, influence mines that detect the magnetic signature of a passing hull, and acoustic mines triggered by the sound of a ship's propellers. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The navigable shipping channels inside it, the standard routes established by the International Maritime Organization in 1968, the lanes that tankers have used for over 50 years to move a fifth of the world's oil, are 2 miles wide in each direction. 2 miles for all of it. All the Saudi crude, all the Qatari LNG, all the Kuwaiti oil, all the Emirati exports. 2 miles of passable water in each direction. Iran lost track of mines it planted in the Strait of Hormuz, and it is therefore unable to fully open the strait. National Park Service. Unable to fully open it, even when it says it is open, even when its foreign minister announces safe passage, even when the ceasefire is technically in effect, even when diplomats in Islamabad are discussing terms. The physical objects in the water do not care about the diplomacy. They are there. Some of them are unlocated, and a ship captain who takes the standard IMO route through the traffic separation scheme is navigating a minefield whose full extent is not mapped. This is why the U.S. advisory directed ships to the Omani coastal waters near the Musandam Peninsula instead. The enhanced security area in the Strait of Hormuz is directing commercial vessels closer to the Omani coast, south of typical shipping routes. Sailing in or near the internationally recognized sea lanes should be considered extremely hazardous due to the presence of mines that have not been fully surveyed and mitigated. Hoodline. The internationally recognized sea lanes, the ones that exist in every maritime navigation chart, the ones that tanker captains have sailed on autopilot for decades, extremely hazardous because of objects in the water whose locations are not fully known. Here's the historical context that explains how we know this is possible. Because Iran has done it before. The Iran-Iraq War. Iran began mining international shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf, not secretly, openly, as a weapon of war against tankers supplying Iraq and its Gulf allies. During the Iran-Iraq tanker war in the late 1980s, Iran deployed sea mines to target U.S. Navy convoys in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, prompting a comprehensive U.S. military response. After an Iranian mine nearly sank the frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts, the U.S. Navy retaliated with Operation Praying Mantis, a comprehensive strike that sank 1 frigate, 1 gunboat, and 3 speedboats, destroyed 2 oil platforms, and left another frigate badly damaged. More than 50 Iranian service members were killed. Engineering news record. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, April 14th, 1988. A United States Navy guided missile frigate struck an Iranian mine in the Persian Gulf. The explosion blew a 15-foot hole in the hull. 10 sailors were wounded. The ship nearly sank. It was saved only by extraordinary damage control efforts that became a case study at the Naval War College for how a crew saves a mortally wounded ship. Operation Praying Mantis followed 4 days later, the largest U.S. naval surface engagement since World War II. Iran lost 2 warships, an oil platform, and dozens of naval personnel in a single day. The mines that nearly sank a U.S. warship in 1988 were the same technology, Iranian influence mines, Soviet-designed, Persian Gulf deployed, that Iran has spent the 38 years since developing into something more sophisticated, more numerous, and more difficult to detect. Those mines are now in the Strait of Hormuz, and some of them are in locations that the country that placed them cannot fully account for. Here is the detail that should stop you cold. Project Freedom, President Trump's military operation to restore shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, deployed the largest naval force assembled in the region since the Iraq War. The U.S. military will deploy guided missile destroyers, as well as more than 100 land and sea-based aircraft, and 15,000 service members to assist Project Freedom. It will combine diplomatic action with military coordination. CBS News, 15,000 personnel, 2 aircraft carriers, more than 100 aircraft, guided missile destroyers, naval robots conducting mine-sweeping operations, aerial surveillance providing continuous monitoring of Iranian movements. On day 1 of that operation, Monday, May 5th, 2026, with all of that force assembled and deployed, 2 American-flagged merchant ships successfully transited the Strait of Hormuz. 2. According to the International Maritime Organization, up to 20,000 seafarers are stranded on board roughly 2,000 vessels in the Gulf near the Strait of Hormuz. National Interagency Fire Center, 2 ships out of 2,000. After triggering fresh violence in the Gulf, Project Freedom appears to have backfired, and shipping executives remain extremely wary about crossing the Strait of Hormuz, said Tim Huxley, chairman of Mandarin Shipping. The strait is still incredibly hazardous, and I expect most ships will continue to avoid transit until both sides come up with something more concrete. Gear junkie, still incredibly hazardous. The chairman of a major shipping firm, after the United States committed 15,000 military personnel and 2 aircraft carriers to reopening a 21-mile strait. 2 ships made it through. Now, the people nobody is talking about. There is no precedent for the stranding of so many seafarers in the modern age, said Damien Chevalier, director of the International Maritime Organization's Maritime Safety Division, National Interagency Fire Center. No precedent in the modern age. Those words came from the senior official at the United Nations agency, responsible for global maritime safety. Not a commentator, not an analyst, the person whose job is to know the history of maritime disasters and evaluate whether the current situation is unprecedented. It is unprecedented. According to the IMO, up to 20,000 seafarers have been stranded in the Persian Gulf on around 2,000 vessels, including oil and gas tankers, bulk carriers, cargo ships, and cruise ships since the war began. Many of the ships are running low on food, drinking water, fuel, and other supplies. Many of the sailors come from India and countries in South and Southeast Asia. The watchers, India, the Philippines, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, countries whose citizens work the global maritime industry in enormous numbers. The crews who operate the tankers that the world's wealthy nations send through its dangerous waters. Since the conflict began, the IMO has recorded at least 19 attacks on vessels, killing 10 seafarers and injuring 8. National Park Service, 10 seafarers killed in 67 days. Not soldiers, not combatants. Maritime workers, people who signed shipping contracts, boarded vessels, and sailed into what was, when they departed their home ports, a normal commercial waterway. The war between the United States and Iran did not ask their permission. The mines that Iran planted did not distinguish between a military vessel and a Maersk container ship, or an Indian-flagged bulk carrier, or a Filipino crude tanker. The mines are agnostic. They wait. And the crews of 2,000 vessels are waiting with them. Here is what is not making headlines. Project Freedom, as announced, is not what most people think it is. According to 2 senior U.S. officials cited by the Wall Street Journal, U.S. Navy warships will not currently escort vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The officials described Project Freedom as more of an international shipping coordination effort. According to 2 U.S. officials cited by Axios, rather than accompany commercial vessels, the U.S. Navy would provide them with information on the best ways to navigate and avoid Iranian naval mines in the strait. One official said U.S. Navy ships would be in the vicinity in case they need to prevent Iranian attacks. CBS News information on the best ways to navigate and avoid mines, not escorts, not minesweepers clearing the path ahead of each vessel, not a guaranteed safe corridor enforced by naval presence on both sides of the hull. information on how to try to avoid objects in the water whose full locations are not known. Brian Clark, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, told CNN that the U.S. plan to guide vessels through the Strait of Hormuz leaves them somewhat vulnerable. Gear junkie, somewhat vulnerable, in a minefield. And while Project Freedom was being announced as the solution to the crisis, Iran was responding. U.S. military destroyers entered the strait, and CENTCOM Chief Admiral Brad Cooper said the military had destroyed 6 Iranian small boats and intercepted cruise missiles and drones launched by Iran to hamper operations. He strongly advised Iranian forces to remain clear of U.S. military assets. He reiterated that a U.S. blockade of Iran that prevents ships from going to or departing Iranian territory also remained in effect. Cyber Cuba, 6 Iranian small boats destroyed. Cruise missiles intercepted. Drones intercepted. While the ceasefire that Trump told Congress on Friday had terminated hostilities was technically still in effect. Iranian drones attacked the Fujairah oil industry zone in the UAE, the first such attack since the ceasefire, representing what analysts described as a significant expansion of the confrontation. Cyber Cuba, a drone strike on an oil industry facility in the UAE during a ceasefire. On the same day that the President of the United States described Project Freedom as a humanitarian gesture to Iran, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi dismissed the initiative as Project Deadlock, arguing that military intervention cannot resolve what is, at its core, a political crisis. Hoodline Project Deadlock. That is what the Iranian foreign minister is calling the American operation that is supposed to free 20,000 stranded sailors from a waterway that Iran mined and then lost track of. Here is what has been documented in legal analysis and has received almost no mainstream coverage. The placement of sea mines in the strait by Iran is seen by just security as a violation of the law of the sea, violating the Hague 8 Convention. National Park Service, the Hague Convention, the 8, signed in 1907, the international legal instrument that governs the placement of automatic submarine contact mines. It requires, among other provisions, that nations notify neutral powers of minefields in areas where peaceful navigation occurs, that mines be constructed to become harmless within an hour if lost from control, and that belligerents take all precautions to ensure the safety of peaceful shipping. Iran mined an international strait. It lost track of some of those mines. It has not provided neutral nations with full charts of minefield locations. It has not confirmed that the mines it lost track of are constructed to become harmless if control is lost. The blocking of the strait by Iran amounts to a violation of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, since it violates the right to transit passage through a strait used for international navigation. The UNCLOS regime of innocent passage through territorial waters also prohibits imposing a fee on passing ships, unless they receive specific services. National Park Service A fee. Iran charged ships over $1 million per vessel to transit its designated corridor, in Chinese yuan, assessed by the Revolutionary Guard, for a strait that international maritime law defines as a waterway where all nations have a right of transit passage that cannot be suspended by any state. The legal violations are documented. The Hague 8 violation is published by a reputable legal organization. The UNCLOS violation is described in the Wikipedia article on the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis. None of them have stopped the mines from being in the water. None of them have located the ones that are lost. Now pull back to the complete picture of what the mines and the blockade are preventing from moving. Until the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, the Strait of Hormuz was open, and about 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas passed through it. National Park Service, 25% of seaborne oil, 20% of LNG, through 21 miles of water that Iran has mined and cannot fully clear, through which 2,000 ships are stranded, through which Project Freedom's 15,000-person, 2-aircraft carrier military operation moved 2 commercial vessels on its first day. Oil prices climbed overnight, with the international benchmark Brent crude jumping further to above $110 a barrel after the dueling claims of the Iranian and U.S. Navy. The national average gas price in the U.S. continued to rise, hitting $4.46. National Interagency Fire Center, $110 Brent, $4.46 average gas price, up from $4.39 yesterday, and from $4.30 last week, and from $3.10 before February 28th. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries has been unable to fully compensate for the supply deficit caused by the Strait blockade because several of its own members, particularly Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE, depend on the Strait of Hormuz to export their own oil. National Interagency Fire Center. The members of OPEC who would normally compensate for a supply disruption by increasing production cannot increase exports because their exports also go through the strait. The mechanism that stabilizes oil prices in a regional disruption does not work when the disruption is at the strait through which the stabilizing producers must ship. And Brent is above $110. Heading where? With peace talks stalled, energy prices have been rising. Neither side has offered much optimism about a deal to end the war. Hoodline neither side. The Islamabad talks failed on a 15-year gap in uranium enrichment timelines. The ceasefire extended indefinitely without a deal. Project Freedom launched, and Iran fired cruise missiles and attacked the UAE on the same day. And the mines are still in the water. So ask yourself 3 questions. Iran lost track of mines it planted in the Strait of Hormuz and is therefore unable to fully open the strait. The U.S. Naval Forces Central Command Advisory states that the standard IMO traffic separation scheme should be considered extremely hazardous due to mines that have not been fully surveyed and mitigated. The U.S. began mine clearance operations on April 11th. Naval robots are being used to locate and clear mines. The mine clearance effort is ongoing while Project Freedom is attempting to move commercial ships through the same water. If the mines that Iran cannot locate are of the influence or acoustic type, triggered by the magnetic signature or propeller sound of a passing hole rather than direct contact, and naval mine clearing robots operate on the surface while these mines detonate at depth on proximity sensors. What is the actual safety margin for a commercial tanker transiting the strait under Project Freedom's information and vicinity protocol versus a full mine escort operation? And who made the decision to describe that margin to shipping executives as a coordination effort rather than as what 2 senior U.S. officials described it to the Wall Street Journal? Project Freedom's first day moved 2 ships, 2 out of 2,000 with 15,000 military personnel deployed. At that rate, clearing the backlog of stranded vessels takes roughly 3 years. The food and water situation on many of those 2,000 ships is critical now. What is the specific humanitarian evacuation plan for the 20,000 stranded seafarers who are not on vessels that can wait 3 years, and which naval assets from Project Freedom are currently assigned to that mission as distinct from the commercial transit mission? National Interagency Fire Center. And if Iran's foreign minister called Project Freedom Project Deadlock, arguing military intervention cannot resolve what is at its core a political crisis, and the Islamabad talks failed, the ceasefire has produced ongoing military exchanges on both sides. Iran struck the UAE on the same day the U.S. declared hostilities terminated, and Brent crude is above $110 with gas at $4. Some of those objects are Iranian naval mines, whose locations the country that placed them cannot fully account for. The robots are looking for contact mines, and influence mines, and acoustic mines in a 21-mile stretch of international water that a fifth of the world's oil trade transited freely, on autopilot, on schedule, on the same routes for 50 years, before February 28, 2026, U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyers are operating in the Arabian Gulf after transiting the waterway. Admiral Brad Cooper strongly advised Iranian forces to remain clear of U.S. military assets. He reiterated that a U.S. blockade of Iran remains in effect. Cyber Cuba. 2 American-flagged merchant ships are safely headed on their journey. Government are all trying to find, and that the Iranian government placed them and cannot tell him where they all are. Brent crude is above $110 per barrel. The national average U.S. gas price is $4.46. National Interagency Fire Center, $4.46. At a station in Indiana where a driver is filling her tank on her way to work. She does not know about the mines. that the country trying to clear them got 2 commercial ships through on day 1 of a 15,000-person military operation, and that the 20,000 sailors running out of food on 2,000 ships are not in any of the press briefings. The mines are still there. The robots are looking. And the strait, the 21-mile passage that a fifth of the world's oil traveled through freely on February 27th, is still, today, exactly what the United States Navy called it in its official advisory to mariners everywhere on Earth: extremely hazardous.